Good morning! How's everybody doing today? Good. Glad to hear it. So, today we're going to have a special guest introduction about one of the wonderful programs that the college runs to help you through this extremely difficult and arduous course. It's called PASS, in the hopes that you will pass. Take it away.
Okay, thank you, Professor. Very good morning to everyone present here, and it's so good to see so many students showing up in the early class, like the spirit. So, PASS, right? What is PASS? But before I talk about PASS, I'd like to talk about you. What made you choose this program in the first place? I want you to take a moment, think about it. Maybe was it money? Software developers do make good money. Maybe you liked software, you liked coding, maybe you liked video games. Well, whatever it was, think about it for a moment. Think about it, why you started this program in the very first place. Okay?
Yeah, I like some of my friends got into programming before I did, and I tried a boot camp, and I enjoyed the problem solving in it. I liked the way I was using my brain.
Nice.
And, yeah.
That's good. Problem solving. Anybody else would like to share this with me? Why they chose this program in the very first place? Anyone? I can share if you'd like. Oh, please go ahead.
I've always enjoyed using computers, and by myself I did research on just as a young age on how they worked and stuff like that. And so to get into a computer programming class, basically see the underneath and how everything works. I've been enjoying it very much.
Very cool. Very cool. For me personally, I was never good at anything. Very average student. Never did very well on the classes. Then I discovered client-side web programming. HTML, CSS, JavaScript, really liked it. Started making companies. I came from a little town in India and started making websites for local companies there. So people started appreciating me. So this became my passion, my love, right? So, which brings to me, who am I? So my name is Nishkarsh Tab. I go by Nish. You can call me Nish. And I am a 5th semester software development student. I just returned from my co-op. I worked as a Java and UI developer. So when I say we're here to learn Java, I really love Java, so I hope you like Java. I worked with Java and Spring Boot. I'm president of the New Developers Club. I don't know if you know the New Developers Club. It's pretty much dead now. We're trying to, get it up and live again. I'm not gonna lie.
So you're trying to renew the new developers?
Yeah, we're trying to renew the new developers. So that's the thing. I was handed the baton from the last president. So that's nice. And I'm also the founder of the Mohawk Redefined Club. This club is about your careers. Especially the focus is on BIPOC students and international students. So if you're struggling with something, if you're struggling with career-related things, resumes, cover letters, you can come up to us and we can help you out. Students helping students, right? But the main thing is PASS. I'm a PASS leader for Comp 162 programming in Java, and PASS is peer-assisted study sessions. Think of it as us getting together, discussing the problems we encountered in the class or maybe at home and working on it together, right? So these sessions are targeted at high risk courses. So it's a way of saying it's not you, it's me, right? It's a way of saying that, right? So the problem is sometimes people can have different learning styles. And they can be n number of things they may not be able to, due to which they may not be able to get through the courses. But through the PASS sessions, you can just come in the sessions. We can talk about those problems. We use facilitation techniques, and it has really helped students out. So all the students that attended, around 80% of them passed in the session. So we have a very high success rate. So if you're struggling, I really suggest joining this session early on, and then being consistent with them. It is free. We have 2 sessions per week, so there's that. Some of the information we don't have yet, but on Mondays we'll have a session from 3 to 5 p.m. It'll be online on Zoom. Wednesday we have a session from 1 to 2 p.m. Not this week, they'll be starting from next week. They are in person, details are to be announced. Friday 4 to 5 p.m. in person, details are again to be announced. Don't worry if you don't remember this information, I'll be emailing this information to you. So a few tips from me is, again, you thought about why you began software development and this program in the very first place. Have a clear vision, keep an eye on the prize, and be prepared to work hard, be prepared to be consistent, right? Enjoy the little things you have. Get involved in on-campus activities, club activities. So when I was in my first semester, I did a very huge mistake that I did not connect with other students at the college. In the next semester, when I started connecting with them, I started to find out about different opportunities. For example, one of the opportunities was the PASS tutoring. I got also a job at college as a research assistant, where I worked with AI and all that kind of stuff, right? So you connect with students, you learn about opportunities, you get better, right? And develop as many projects as you can in the beginning, and then work on quality projects as well. Don't forget to enjoy the little moments and victories. And if you want to join our Discord server for TND, you can use this QR code. I'll keep that here for a moment, otherwise I can email that to you as well.
Yeah.
May I give you an endorsement?
Yep.
So, the first time I worked with the PASS folks was over the summer. They have a tendency to work closely with the professors in the course to make sure that what they're going through in PASS is relevant to what we're doing in class. There's, that degree of coordination means that this is a better educational product, if you want to put it that way, than, it's like your own self-study is very, very important, but having this little extra thing that you can go to can be, I found a lot of students over the summer had a lot of success with the PASS program. Yes?
I just want to say I went to the PASS for the Python course, even though I didn't really need it, and I still found it valuable, so.
Well, there you go. Student endorsements too.
Good stuff. Okay, so today's takeaway PASS is there to help you. I'm there for you. It is free, 2 sessions per week, and keep coding. If you have any questions, here's my email. Feel free to reach out to me.
Oh, and they run a draw every week too, and I won a $50 one card last year, so there's that.
Nice.
There you go.
Thanks so much. Thank you.
Okay.
Wish card.
Thank you very much. You sticking around for the lesson? Yeah, that's the other thing, is like they actually stick around for the lessons, you know? Need to be quite that loud. Yes, sure, fine, whatever. If you haven't done so already, please take this opportunity to open up IntelliJ.
Yeah, we should have signed one for I didn't do it all.
No, for Java.
Yeah. Some program is not.
Oh, the thing.
Yeah, yeah.
Okie dokie.
I think
So, I'd like to start off by going through assignment 1 with you folks. The due date for this is Sunday at midnight, so this has to be done this week. Assignment 1 is to produce one screen, quote unquote screen, from the ancient video game Arkanoid. So, this assignment will use mostly the JavaFX material, but you will also require your basic language constructs, if statements, loops, variable declarations, all of that fun stuff. Okay? So, you are to use the FX graphics template for the assignment. That is the same template that we used in class last time. Basically, you are to draw something that looks like this in JavaFX. Alright? So let's go through the specific requirements here. Specific requirement number 1. This screen contains 2 regions, the play region and the scoring region. They have to be visually separated somehow. The game region contains bricks, a ball, and a paddle. The display region contains the player's score, what level they are on, and what the high score is. Now, you're not required to make a working game of Arkanoid, right? Much as I'd love to give you something like that, bit out of scope for, the first assignment. What you are to do is draw a static image, just a plain static image, not changing, no controller inputs, the ball does not move, the ball is simply drawn on the screen. Now the trick is that many of the parameters with respect to this screen must be acquired from user input using standard input interaction and the command line interface. So you remember that business where we were, typing stuff and taking that and storing it as variables and doing stuff with it. That's what you need to do to populate certain key values inside of this screen. Does this make sense? So, for example, when your program runs, you should start by having a dialogue with the user using standard input. Do not show the JavaFX stage until the dialogue is over. These are the things you ask the user. 1, how many rows and columns of bricks should be drawn? 2, what the current score is, what the high score is, and what level or wave you are on. 3, the ball position. And 4, the paddle X position. The paddle should be at a fixed Y position, but it can move left and right. It has a region in which it has valid values. So, this is an important sentence right here. Make sure that the user enters values that will look good. That is to say, if you are drawing the position of the ball belongs in the gameplay area, not in the scoring area. So if I test your program by trying to put the ball into the scoring area, your program should not allow me to do so. Right? Your program will require validity checks. Right? You take input from the user, check to make sure that it's valid, and only if it's valid, you proceed to the next user input. Otherwise, you ask the user again to correct their input. Yes?
Can we still expect the user to input the correct variable type? So like if we ask for an integer, are they going to put in a string?
That you can expect. That's a very intelligent question, thank you. So the question is, can we expect the user to enter the correct data type? We will not have the ability to guard against incorrect data types, really, truly, until we cover exceptions. I believe that's week 12. So for this and all future user interactions of this nature, until we hit exception handling, yes, you may assume that the user enters the correct data type. In this case, pretty much everything is a number. Some of them should be integers, others can be doubles, right? In JavaFX, doubles are permissible as like positions in the grid system. Score in a game like Arkanoid should be an integer, right? Wave should be an integer. You can't be on level 3.7, right? Even if you want to do like a thing where it's like world 3 level 7, 3.7, you're still not going to do like 3.73737373, right? It's not like floating point data. But yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good. Yes. There are a couple of additional restrictions on the data. If the current score given by the user is greater than the high score that the user entered, make the high score, create the high score with the current score. So if current score exceeds high score, that's the new high score, right? High score should not be less than the current score. Tell the user in each prompt what the range is, the range of acceptable values, and make them repeat each input until they get it right. So the question then becomes, how do you determine what the range of acceptable values is? Well, that's going to be different for each and every one of you unless you plagiarize. The particular manner that you're drawing the screen, there are all kinds of little design decisions that go into that. How big is the window going to be to start off with? Where are you positioning the gameplay area versus the information area? All of these things will affect things like how far can the paddle legally move in the X direction, right? So you have to select boundaries which make sense and look good for your specific version, right? And in particular, I will be testing for negative numbers and whether your programs allow negative numbers. Does it make sense to have a negative number of rows for bricks?
No.
No? Good. That's the correct answer. So basically, the validation checking is, disallow things that don't make sense. So long as everything's constrained to the correct type, you can assume that. And make sure it looks good, right? In theory, in Arkanoid, the ball can't be over top of a brick, right? So the easiest way to restrict that is to constrain the ball region to a region where no bricks can be drawn, right? But yeah. Any questions about that so far? So, the output should look a bit like this. It does not have to look exactly like this. This is a screenshot from the game Arkanoid as it existed on the Nintendo Entertainment System. The Nintendo Entertainment System was a sprite-based raster graphics engine. JavaFX is a vector-based drawing engine. You're never going to get this to look exact like it would be a heck of a lot of work to get a vector graphics engine to look precisely like this. That's not the point of the assignment, right? Bricks are rectangles, right? The ball is an oval, right? The paddle is a rectangle. You have to figure out some way to distinguish between these two halves. Once you get over here, these are all text, right? Text inputs. Does this make sense? Yeah. Good. There's a tip here about how you might go about calculating the positions of a bunch of bricks that exist in a grid, right? You don't necessarily have to space them evenly, but I always appreciate when people go the extra math to have their bricks spaced out evenly, depending on how many bricks are entered. It always just makes it look a bit nicer, rather than having everything clustered up on the left side. But yeah, have a little fun with it, you know? This is one of the more quote-unquote creative assignments that you will be given in this class. So, you know, have fun. If you would like some extra challenge, if this is not sufficient challenge for you, you can replace some of the simple shapes that you add to your Arkanoid screen with image files that you find from the internet. Here are a couple of lines of code where you can use to insert images. You know, spruce it up a little bit. Maybe add the Arkanoid logo or something like that, you know. Number 2, extra challenge number 2, use the FX animation template instead and add some animation effects such as a moving paddle and ball or a score that ticks up. Maybe you could even find out a way to add sound effects. Waggles eyebrows. Documentation standards are according to the Assignment 0-1 Documentation Standards document. If you include all of the comments included in that document, plus other comments where applicable, you are basically you will get 20% on your assignment, even if the code itself is complete garbage. Well-documented garbage is still more valuable than undocumented garbage. Does that make sense? Good. Unless your code is such complete garbage that it's completely illegible and I can't even tell what it is anyways, and at that level it's like, well, you have commented literally nothing, you know. But that's okay. That's the part where I get to be a little generous. You have approximately 1 week to complete the assignment. So, manner of submission. Hand in your work by submitting to the Dropbox only the Java files, the .java files, right? In the past, I don't know if anybody's repeating this course, but in the past, you would have a zip file that you would, like you'd zip up your whole project directory and send it, right? These days, we're changing the way it works slightly. We would like just the Java files specifically, and we would like you to modify the file name to add the .txt file extension without removing the .java file extension. Sorry, you had a question? No? Okay. So that's like, you know, it's just kind of like a minor nuisance on my end when you don't do this, but like Arkanoid.java, if this is the name of the source code file, you add .txt, then submit it. You do not remove .java. Okay? I know this may be the first introduction some of you may have had to files with multiple file extensions, but you know, there's a reason we're asking you to do this. Basically, it's so that you know, in order to scan your work with Turnitin, we have to have something that doesn't look like source code in the file extension. So that's what the purpose of that is. The Dropbox is actually constrained so that it will only accept .txt files. So, does that make sense? So, no zip files, don't worry about zip files, everything's cool. Alright? Also, don't worry about packages. In the past, you were required to put your work inside of a package, but these days, we're not really as concerned about that. So, any questions about assignment 1? Now's your chance. Speak now or forever hold your peace. Questions?
Is there any bonus marks for getting the bonus stuff done?
No. Not on this one. Although, you will ingratiate yourself to the good graces of your professor, which may have beneficial effects in the future because, oh yeah, this is the person who actually does work. Okay. So, not that I grade assignments based on previous assignment performance or anything like that, because that would be wrong. Anyway, so, going back to week 1, unfortunately we didn't quite wrap up all of the topics in week 1, so I'd like to do that before we move on to week 2. I think that makes sense. So, the place we stopped was graphical output. We did some Java FX light drawing. Some people made snowmen. Some people made the Olympic rings. Some people figured out how to get a triangle on top of a house, to get a triangle on top of a square to make a house. This page is decent quick reference for when you're doing assignment 1, just so you know. So, let us now consider data types and expressions. I have already talked a certain degree about data types in Java. I have also indicated that data types in Java are more strictly followed than in Python, or any other dynamic language for that matter, including JavaScript. You'll find that JavaScript tracks much more closely to Python than Java does. You know, since you're learning both of them at the same time, most of you probably. So, data types and expressions. In Python, we can enter quote-unquote unbounded integers. In Java, we cannot. If we declare something as an integer, that comes with, that comes with a declared data width. We are declaring this integer a as having, and does anybody know how many bits an integer is? Just off the top of your heads? It's, okay, so quick tip, everything when it comes to like data types in memory is always some power of 2, right? So it's not 4, it's not 8, it's not 16,
32?
It's 32. So integers are 32 bits in size. They are signed integers, so what you actually get is about negative 2 to the power of 31 to 2 to the power of 31 as your effective range that the numbers can occupy, right? I always have to, I don't have the number memorized, but 2 to the power of 31. So this is about the largest integer that can be represented using 32 bits, right? Reasonably large number, but you know, there are more people on the planet than that, so you may need a larger integer for certain applications, right? If you need a larger integer than this, there is another data type called long. Long stands for long integer. This is actually how it's stated in C. The long is a modifier on the integer type, but in Java, there's nothing that's long that isn't an integer, so it's just long stands for long integer. Does anybody care to guess how many bits a long integer has?
64?
Correct, 64. Giving you an effective range in signed arithmetic. You see they want to represent it in scientific notation. That's quite a bit larger, right? So, if you run out of space in an integer, changing the data type to a long integer will fix the problem most of the time. But Python doesn't do this. The way that Python does it, it will dynamically allocate additional memory to the storage of your number for as long as you wish it to do that. Basically until your computer runs out of memory. The cost that you pay for this is once integers get outside of a certain size, they become much, much slower to perform any calculation on, right? This is basically true anytime you're working with anything larger than 64 bits. Does anybody know the reason why? Has to do with the CPU. Bus size, yes, absolutely. So all of, this has been the case for a while, all of the CPUs that you see sort of in the modern context, with the exception of some on like small devices, mobile platforms, IoT stuff, they are all 64-bit CPUs. This means that the native bit size that is that the math is performed on inside of the CPU is 64 bits. So it used to be that long integers took more clock cycles to process than regular integers because the you were trying to perform 64-bit calculations on a 32-bit CPU. So obviously you need more clock cycles to do that. But since everything's 64 bits these days anyways, long computes as fast as a regular integer, at least with respect to the CPU. So the question might remain, why do we use integer instead of long most of the time anyway? Yes?
Storage capacity?
Storage capacity, yes. In memory, you can store twice as many integers as you can longs in the same space. And most of the time, the extended memory of a long integer is not useful anyways, right? It's rare that you would be storing an integer, in the 1 times 10 to the 12 range, right? It's very uncommon that you would have an integer that was that size, because that's what floating point arithmetic is for, right? there's an overlap between like when you would use floating point and when you would use integers. Incidentally, floating points are not just for representing decimals, right? Floating point numbers also allow you to represent very large and very small numbers because, it's not fixed point. There's actually a different style of number that's not used very commonly called fixed point arithmetic, where you just decide where the decimal point is and then everything's, around that decimal point. The reason it's called floating point is because there's another part of the number that tells you what the offset of the decimal point is here. That allows you to represent very large and very small numbers in floating point arithmetic. I think it's up to like something times 10 to the positive and negative 300 or something, which is a very, very large range, right? So yeah, anyway. I talked about this last time in class. Python does not recognize the distinction between characters and strings. To Python, all characters are singleton strings. They are strings composed of one character. In Python, it doesn't matter whether you use single or double quotes. But in most programming languages, single quotes mean character, string means double quotes. The reason that this is important, in dynamic languages, they like to kind of fudge this distinction for the purposes of making the code work with fewer errors type thing. In more strict languages, we do not confuse the data structure with the thing the data structure contains, because they are different concepts, right? A string is a data structure. What does the string data structure contain? What is the base carrier type? Characters, right? So we draw a distinction between that which is held by the string and the string itself. Does that make sense? Most languages you will use in this program actually use these interchangeably. JavaScript uses them interchangeably, Python uses them interchangeably, PHP does to an extent. It actually borrows from Bash here. They perform slightly different operations, but in general they're both strings. If you don't use the advanced features, they're interchangeable in PHP. So it's really like the more operations-based languages, the more strict languages where this is the case. But you still have to learn how to use those too. So, good. Yeah. So if you use single quotes to indicate a string, that is a syntax error. Incidentally, there's another syntax error on this line. What is it?
No semicolon.
No semicolon. Very good. So, in Java, all data types come in two forms. You have objects and you have primitives. If it's not a primitive, it's an object. If it's not an object, it's a primitive, right? The primitives actually also have wrapper objects that allow you to access certain methods, but we won't talk about that until later in the course. Right now, we will be happy with just ints, floats, and longs. Incidentally, on that subject, there's also a short. So if long gets you 64 bits, int gets you 32 bits. Anybody care to guess what a short gets you?
16.
Very good. 16 bits. So here's an interesting question. What happens when you exceed this? Let's say I had a number that was the largest number I could represent. It it actually works better with unsigned arithmetic, and I'll show you with only 4 bits. So let's imagine we had a 4-bit number, right? Slots for 4 bits, right? Let's imagine that we had 1s in every slot. Or let's do actually 1 minus. We'll do a little bit of binary math, right? So, does anybody know how to actually get the Arabic numeral out of this binary number? Well, 2 to the 0, 2 to the 1, 2 to the 2, 2 to the 3. You multiply by the bit value and then sum them up, right? So this one, it's a 0, so we exclude it. So this is 2 plus 4 plus 8, which is 14. So, what happens when we add 1 to this? Reasonably simple. We get 1, 1, 1, 1, which is 15. Very good. Now, here's the question. What happens when we add 1 to that?
Yeah, it exceeds the bit.
We get an overflow flag raised in the CPU, but it doesn't necessarily cause an error. This is what happens. If we add 1 again, examining this combination in binary, what's 1 plus 1?
1, 0.
1, 0, right. So this is a 0, carry the 1,
0.
right? That's a 0, carry the 1. That's a 0, carry the 1. That's a 0, carry the 1. But this bit does not fit. This is an unfit bit. Our number, remember, is only 4 bits in size. This thing is lost. So, in 4-bit binary arithmetic, 15 plus 1 is equal to 0. Right?
Yeah.
Is this making sense?
Yeah.
Question?
More of a comment. In Civilization, ever played that game?
Yes, you're stepping on my example.
Oh, sorry.
I was just about to bring that up.
It's a wonderful example of the overflow.
Yeah. Do you want to take it or shall I?
I can try and explain it. You probably explain it better.
Well, you know, I bring it up every time. You know?
Oh.
So, there's this popular series of video games called Sid Meier's Civilization, right? Oh, good lord. I don't get. I hate the news. Get out of here, news. I don't want news.
That's the next prime minister right there.
Yeah. What, Donald Trump is the next prime minister? God. I hope he stays in the States. I hope he stays in the States. Anyway, what was I talking about? Civilization, yes. So the Civilization games are like this grand strategy you play as like one of a number of selected civilizations from human history. You know, you can play as China or as Sumeria or whatever. And the goal is, you know, either like you win by a bunch of different victory conditions, grand strategy type thing. So what's interesting is in the earlier Civilization games, they didn't attempt to like simulate leaders of famous civilizations. They only went for like, you know, you're England, so you're Team Red or something. But later on, they tried to make the game more dynamic by having different leaders for the civilizations as well. And of course, one of the famous leaders from history that they chose to simulate was Gandhi. Gandhi, noted pacifist, right? So they ran with that and decided that Gandhi has a personality such that he will never, ever, ever declare war on anybody for any reason, right? No matter how good his army is. So, in that game, each leader had a aggressiveness score. And some of you may foresee where I'm going with this. You can, through the course of the game, modify a leader's aggressiveness towards you by various modifiers, like, you know, if you do trade deals with them, that decreases aggression, you know, it increases aggression if you, you know, declare war on their friends, or have, you know, territory adjacent their territory, stuff like that, right? So,
I think even if they got like new stats, like I think
yes,
once he unlocks diplomacy, his aggression score then lowers.
yes, exactly. Even certain technologies you unlock will have effects on diplomacy. So, the problem was that through one thing or another, Gandhi's aggression score at some point could be made actually 0, and then a modifier could subtract 1 from it, right? So what happens if you add 1 and get 0 from the max number? What happens if you have the min number and subtract 1? What do you get? Yes? You get the max. So, and it's very interesting, this particular bug tended to arise in late game after everybody had nukes. So you would be playing the game, and, you know, you would think, oh, I've been so nice to Gandhi this game, you know? And then he would just like, you would just pull out nuclear Armageddon and kill everybody in the whole game. And like in the game, if you use too many nuclear bombs, they actually do like have environmental effects, and the planet actually gets ruined, and it does ruin it for everybody else. So yeah, it turned out, I believe in subsequent versions of Civilization, they actually kept that bug as a feature.
They kept it in because people enjoyed it so much of just seeing
Yeah.
Gandhi. Okay, I'm gonna nuke everyone now.
Yeah, nuclear Gandhi is just something you can't throw away once you have had it as a bug. The fans demanded nuclear Gandhi. So
It reverted it up to 255, I think, is the max value.
yeah.
So it would just go from peaceful to 255 aggression.
Yeah, absolutely amazing. Basically, the correct way to play those Civilization games with Gandhi in the game and not get nuked by him is basically to be mean to him and rough him up a little bit at various points in history, so that he doesn't get the, you know, the pacifist aggression reduction. But anyway, another example of overflow is like, there's a glitch in the old Pokemon games, Pokemon Red and Blue. It was possible to glitch yourself a Pokemon over level 100, and for those of you who've never played the game, Pokemon levels are capped at 100, so you could get yourself to level 150. Then you could use the level up item to increase your level even further, but that capped out at 255, 255 being 2 to the 8th for an unsigned integer, and if you increased it beyond that, it would wrap you around back to 0, so you could have a level 0 Pokemon. So anyway, so that's how integers work. All right, that is what the CPU speaks with. Everything else is trying to hide that fact from you by various forms of trickery. Does that make sense? Good. Yes. Arithmetic expressions. So, some notes on division. In Python, we have 2 division operators. Can anybody tell me the difference between them?
One is an integer division, the other one's a float division.
Very correct. So, 2 slashes, integer division, 1 slash, floating point division. So, if you use integer division, you get an integer result. If you use floating point division, you get a floating point result, right? In Java, you have but 1 division operator. So the question is, when do you get floating point and when do you get integer division? Yes?
When you divide integers, you get integer division.
Yes.
When you do any other kind, you get floating point result?
Yes. So basically, and you have to start thinking this way to think in a statically typed language. You have to think about the types of the operands influencing the type of the output, right? So, if I have int divide by int, that results in int. But if, oh gosh, somehow I magically lose the ability to write words and characters. Huh. So, if either or both of the inputs to the division operation is a floating point number, the end result is considered to be a floating point number. Right? So, the reason for this is to do anything else would cause the loss of information. Right? When you take a floating point number and you chop off the decimal component, which is, what you do when you cast it to an integer, you are losing some of the information contained in that variable, right? So, if I have 5.932 and I remove the 0.932, that's considered loss of information. Right? Going from integer to integer does not lose any information, right? So, this is, the fact that these will result in a floating point operation is a protection mechanism that Java has built in to protect the data that is contained in the variables contained in the operands. It won't lose data unless you tell it to, right? Now that being said, that makes it somewhat tricky to manage whether that is a floating point or an integer operation, right? So, there are two ways of fixing it. The first is to modify the input types, right? The types of the operands as declared integers, right? This is not always possible. It's not always advisable. Sometimes these won't just be variables that you've declared inside of your program. These may be arguments to methods. These method arguments may be defined in an API. Modifying them can be problematic. For those of you who, so I should take a brief moment to talk about what an API is, right? So when you are working in software with other people, right? The application programming interface, the API, is an agreement between you and everyone you're working with, right? I will provide these methods with this interface. You may use them. This is what they do, right? This is the same thing that, the concept of the API is, very prevalent in modern software design. You will often hear it in the context of a REST API. It's the same concept in a REST API, except the interface is being provided through HTTP packets rather than, directly calling methods in a programming language, right? So it's the same idea though, right? If you have an exposed web API and clients and customers are relying on the second argument being an integer, if you change it to a float, you are going to cause problems, right? You're going to cause problems that your boss is going to tell you about, right? And you don't want to do that. That's a bad idea. We're trying to not only get you jobs with this college program, we're trying to help you keep your jobs, right? So don't modify the API. So how do you solve this problem then? If you can't just willy-nilly, arbitrarily, by executive fiat, change the data types of the things you're working with? Well, you can change them on the fly with a process known as typecasting. Typecasting will be a new concept for people who are Python exclusive. Python does this sort of thing dynamically in the background, right? You never write a typecast in Python because, Python is theoretically supposed to handle all of that. But when you're working in a statically typed language, it's useful to be able to force a type conversion yourself, right? That is what typecasting is for. So, mechanically, the way that you perform a typecast, as a prefix operator, you put the data type you'd like it to become in brackets before the thing you're casting. Now, this is an operation, and that operation has precedence. So, sometimes, and we'll see examples of this when we start typecasting objects, for the purposes of polymorphism, you may have to put brackets around the whole thing that you're typecasting as well. It's situational. But, for example, let's just there we go. Now get out of here. New Java class. Remember our shortcut for inserting public static void main. You type the word main and tab. There you go. That's large enough to be seen at the back, I assume. So, let's say we have integer a is equal to 6, integer b is equal to 4. Our quick form for system.out.println, sout tab a divided by b is equal to there we go. To run this file, right click, run example.main. Once you've told it which one, like which file you want to run, you can use the quick run button up in the corner, but until it knows which Java class you're supposed to be running, that'll be grayed out. So, a divided by b is 1. This is correct. This is integer division, right?
Yeah.
So, if we pull this all the way back to elementary school, how many times does 4 go into 6?
1.
1. What's the remainder?
2.
That's the modulus operator, right? You guys probably did a bit on modulus in Python, right?
Yeah.
2 weeks on modulus,
Yeah.
wow. On
You
one
gotta
operator.
Pound that into the
Well, it
skull.
was like all the operators, but it was like, 2 weeks of just looking at the same operators.
Yeah, okay. Well, in that case, I won't dwell on it too heavily. I will say that modulus in combination with a counter is how you produce repetition. Like counting from 0 to 10 and then back to 0 and to 10 again. That's a combination of a regular counter plus modulus. So modulus does have a bunch of interesting applications, but if you guys have done, this seems like a pretty bright class, so perhaps we don't have to hammer it too hard. So, what if these are floats?
Then you get through,
You get floats.
you get like 1.2.
There you go, 1.5. So, if we cast this one as an integer, we still get 1.5 because b is still a float. But if we cast that one as a float as well, or cast it as an integer as well, we are back to integer division. Does this make sense? Good. So, question.
What priority does the typecast have?
It binds more tightly than arithmetic operators, Boolean operators, like your standard operator set, but I believe it binds less tightly than things like function calls. So like, it certainly binds less tightly than assignment, or maybe assignment is the weakest. I think assignment is the weakest one. Yeah, it's like you have to get into like operations involving brackets to see where it goes. There's a good example of this coming up when we talk about typecasting objects to produce polymorphism. So I'll leave it for there, if that's okay. Good. So, question?
Is there an easy method to show what type your variable is? Like
Hover over it. Yeah, with modern editors, we're kind of no longer in the day where like you have to annotate all of your variables with the type that they are. Although I'm sure in certain companies, especially older ones, that will still be like the naming convention for variables. By the way, there's a little bit of fun for your future. When you actually get out into industry, the companies that you work for will often have their own in-house naming conventions for various things. So, and one of those is often variables. So it is a little bit more work, but sometimes useful to annotate a variable name with the type of the variable. So like you'll be, instead of having like, you know, noodles, you'll have like I_noodles to indicate that it's an int, stuff like that. This is the type of thing that companies love to do because it's like embedding, if you want to be pretentious, you call it self-documenting code. But basically it's just writing the code in such a way that people can more easily read it without using comments, if that makes sense. Anyway, that's the sort of thing that you'll probably encounter depending on what company you know, if you're working for a startup, then you get to be the person who decides people need to do that. But anyway, so in Python, we have the double asterisk operator for exponentiation. In Java, we have to go through the math library to get exponentiation. Anything in the math library will return a float. In Python, plus doubles as string concatenation with automatic typecasting of whatever you're concatenating. Fortunately, in Java, that is the same. We don't have to call toString on things that are being, you know, eventually put into the bucket of a string. They will automatically convert to strings. That's not the case in all languages. So, in Python, you have str used as a function, which converts something to a string. In Java, basically you don't worry about it if it's a primitive. It'll do it automatically. And if you're really, really strongly concerned about it, with an object, objects will have defined a toString method, even if you haven't defined it yourself, which anytime you're performing string conversion on an object, the toString method is called. Once we talk about object-oriented, we'll see how to overload that, provide our own custom definition. But just be aware that the toString method is probably something that's going to be on test 1. So, good. Arithmetic works in Python pretty much the same way it works in Java, as with any other C-based language. Yes. Talked about this, talked about that. Oh, Java does not support multiplication or repetition of strings using the multiplication operator. Java doesn't have it. So you can't do like that fun thing of being like A, capital A, times 10,000 plus GH and have like, you can't do that.
Put it in a loop again.
In a loop, sure, but you can't do it with just like a multiplication. You can't one-line it, you know?
Python is the best.
Other important considerations. So, literals, right? Everybody knows what I'm talking about when I say literal. Hopefully. If you don't, put your hand up. Okay. So a literal is anything in the grammar of the language which is meant to represent a value. Right? Rather than, you're not representing a variable, you're representing a value directly. So, when you put the number 5 in a program, that is a literal. When you put 5.0, that is a literal. When you put, a string, that is a string literal, right? It's meant to represent the value. So, given that the types going into things are important, we recognize a distinction between integer and, floating point or double literals. In order to make something into a double literal, even if you're not using the decimal component, you put 0.0 onto that integer. That forces it to be a double, and then it'll behave the way that you want it to, presumably. Java will automatically cast integers as doubles in order to do arithmetic, but it will not do the opposite. Doubles will not be cast as integers because that loses information. Good. Finally, named constants. If you use the final keyword when declaring a variable, it becomes a constant. So, what is a constant?
Something that doesn't or can't be changed.
Something that doesn't or can't be changed, yes. So, basically, it's a way of saying, if this variable is ever assigned to, make that a syntax error. That's what final means. Make sense? Most of the time, it's convention that constants are given in all caps, but, honestly, they don't come up that much. Good. Any questions? All right. I'm going to zip through to section 5, just in the interests of getting through this material so we can get to week 2. So strings then. I've mentioned this already, but let's just hone this to a razor sharp edge. Strings are objects. So Java is so object-oriented that even in the course of our simple examples we've done so far, we have needed to use and declare objects. When we declared a scanner, we were declaring a scanner object. When we create a string, we are creating a string object. Strings have methods. So, in addition to concatenating strings with the plus operator, there are also a number of methods that you can call on any given string. A method is just a function that attaches to an object. So, if you take a look inside of the Canvas shell, there, I think we go. There are a number of string operations which can and will be useful. So, oh, bloody news!
Miss America.
I don't need Americans. I don't need Americans on my screen right now. All right. So, bloody Americans, always being where you don't want them. All right. So, so we talked about string comparison. Previously in class, we did an example. You do not use regular equality comparison to compare strings in Java. Does anybody remember from last class what that's actually comparing? Yes.
The memory locations of the variable.
Correct. The memory locations of those objects, which is generally not what you want to do unless you're trying to decide whether they are the same object. Because it is possible to have multiple references to the same object. But this is not what most people mean by string comparison most of the time. What people actually mean by string comparison most of the time is they want to call strcomp from the C standard library. That's what they want to do most of the time, right? So, given that this is Java and not C, unfortunately, you know how much I love C, we define the equals method. So we have a couple of variants on the equals method made specifically for strings. You'll see that we have equals and equals ignore case. So you may recall, or you may anticipate, this is probably a problem that you've seen already in Python. Sometimes you want to compare things in a case-insensitive way, right? If that's the case, you do one of two things. You either take your string and go through it and knock down every capital letter to a lower or the other way around, and then you compare it to an all capital or all lowercase version of the string you're comparing it to. That's one way of doing it. The other way is to just use equals ignore case, which is a special equality comparison that just does what you want it to do without the fuss and the muss in one line. Question?
If I use s dot equals ignore case and Sam is all capital letters, it's equivalent to Sam being all lowercase letters?
Yes, because it's ignoring case. Yeah. So, compare to is an interesting one. This is actually more directly the output of the C standard library function. So, okay, so characters then, right? Did they ever show you an ASCII table?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah? Good!
Capitals are better than small.
Yes. So, what's actually happening inside of the comparison function is that we are tracing through the data structure one element at a time, comparing ASCII values, right? That's why you need a special method for ignoring case, because an uppercase and a lowercase character of the same letter have different ASCII values, right? So, if you're tracing through, if I'm comparing the string AAB to AAC, right?
ACC.
Oh, there we go, thank you. That's the same, that's the same, that's different. Because fundamentally these are numbers, we can decide which one of those comes before the other. It goes according to the ASCII value, right? So, if you want to know whether a word comes before or another one, before or after another in the dictionary, compare to, they'll give you a 0 if they're equal, a negative number if S came before T, so S comes before T, and positive if T comes before S. Yes?
Are those values, the positive and negative values, derived just by subtracting the ASCII numbers?
I believe that's the case, yes. It's just like the
Adding
gap
whatever.
between them. But for our purposes, all we have to do is,
Negative and positive.
yeah, write an if statement if, this is greater than 0, if it's less than 0, and if it's equal to 0. Those are 3 different cases, right? Unless you want to do something more with it, which you could do, but, not for our purposes. Make sense? Good. So, many times we want the user to answer yes or no to a question. A robust way of doing that is to get a whole string, but then just check the first character. So a lot of the time people have various forms of yes that they'll enter in, but they will all mostly start with the letter Y. So if you just check the first letter, you'll get a positive or a negative result. In old computer interfaces, they only asked you for the first letter and would complain at you if you gave them more than that sometimes. So,
There's gonna be one person out there that answers sure.
well, yeah, but we don't have to worry about such people. So, in order to extract a single character from a string, we have the char at method. You have char at, then you specify the index of the character you wish to read. In the case of this example, that would be the first index, which is 0. Yes. And that is how you grab a character out of a string. Now, what will the return type of that operation be? Character. That's right. Because, remember, characters are the things that strings are composed of. If you pull something out of the data structure, it is the base type. In this case, that's character. Does that make sense? Good. Some other nice, interesting, good methods which are useful. Starts with and ends with. These are Boolean tests for prefixes and suffixes. Right? Ends with, where you provide a file extension here, right? That's how you would tell if a file has the correct file extension. Right? At least that's the easiest way. Index of provides you the index of the string if it occurs inside of that, the string on which the method is being called. So, in all cases, S here is the string on which the method is being called. Methods are called through dot syntax. So it's the string we're interested in, dot, operation, provide parameters. Does that make sense? That is the pattern that all Java follows. Python even follows this pattern as well. Many, many languages use dot syntax. Basically, PHP won't though. PHP uses an arrow instead, which is kind of annoying. In PHP, it's
Everything
that.
I've heard about PHP sounds annoying.
PHP is like, I don't know. It's like, as bad languages go, it's not too bad, but it's not fun. It's got a lot of quirks. It's a very quirky language.
Difficult to debug.
Yes, well, and that's possibly also because of the environment that you've got PHP in, right? It's like, in order to debug PHP, you have to like go look at the returned packet information in the browser, right? So, you know, you guys have,
Backend stuff sucks.
you have a whole 8 months to live beautifully ignorant lives before you get to PHP, you know, in the fall. So enjoy your non-PHP tainted existences while it's possible. Honestly though, I prefer it to Python. A lot of its quirks are actually derived from bash scripting, and I rather like bash scripting, so personal preference. PHP isn't too bad. Anyway, where was I? Oh yes. So the index of operation is your basic search operation. It will do both characters and strings. If it returns a -1, that is your failure result. -1 means this thing was not found. Does that make sense? And trim, if the user typed extra spaces or tabs at the beginning or end, trim will trim them off, right? So this is a pretty bright group, so I'm not, you know, perhaps I don't need to say this, but spaces and tabs are characters and do take up space, right? When I have, you know, a lake as a string, the space character, which I believe is ASCII value 32, it sits in there, right? That is in memory. It is a mistake to imagine that it doesn't exist. And incidentally, if you haven't seen it before, this character is, I want to write a space, but it's a space, so in theory I'm not writing anything. Like on a written test, if spaces are important in a string, which they sometimes will be, like for example, if you're trying to show 2 spaces instead of 1 space, you use that space character and then I know what you mean on a test. Alright? Question?
Kind of semantic. Would a just straight line be okay, or do you want that?
See, that one's overloaded with underscore.
Okay.
Right? If you put the little ticks on it, then I know you're not talking about an underscore character.
Maybe I write in sans serif.
Hmm?
Maybe I write in sans serif. I write the little ticks.
Well, I mean, pretty much everybody writes in sans serif, but did you have a question?
Stretching, sorry.
Okay. Yeah, so, any questions about that? Good. So, I think that we can probably try out some of the examples quickly. Exercises week 2. There we go. So, some of these are pretty good. Oh, wait, this is week 2. Pardon me. Week 1. There we go. So okay. I don't like any of these, so I'm going to assign you my own. I mean, they're all good practice, but I have one particular one that I have in mind. So, oh, wait, no. It's for next week, pardon me. Yeah, okay. It, like, involves loops and stuff. Okay, so, input text, and then output it, but with the word hate changed to the word love throughout. Okay, so you are to write an algorithm which receives some input from the user. The program then scans that input for occurrences of the word hate, as in I hate Python, and then replaces each occurrence of that with the word love, as in I love Python, which I don't. So, yeah, go to. I'll walk around, help people. We'll give this about 10-15 minutes, then I'll do the solution on the board. Okay?
Quick question about the assignment. Is that due next Sunday or this Sunday?
This Sunday, I believe. Let me just verify.
Because it's under module week 2.
This is week 2.
Oh, okay, but what you're showing us is under week 1.
I know, because we didn't finish it.
Okay.
It's okay, we'll get there. There's a little bit of flex built into the schedule. Let's see. Does it have a due date that's been assigned? Nope. Okay. There. Now it has a due date. There we are. Have fun.
Main, just main, take main and then tab. You got the run, and you listen up to and then like, so after and enter the main.
If you finish this one, obviously, move on to the next. Oh, sorry. So how are you doing the brick generation? Oh. How are you going to tell how many you're generating and how many rows or columns? It'll be a lot easier than the way you're doing it. So the user enters some random phrase. If the word hate occurs, then you change it to love. But if it doesn't appear, then you don't. the string operations? Yeah, go back here. Go back. And scroll down. It's right there. Yep, 1B. No problem.
My question is not really to this, it's just like why you want to. What is it? Like, what just should be return true, return false, I think it's the way it works, sometimes it's not true, I want to if it's just around.
So, the reason that it didn't work is because that's what void means in main. It means it doesn't have a return type.
Oh, okay, so that'd be the only way to do that, that's my goal.
Yes.
So it should be public static bool main, because he's trying to return a bool.
I mean, that's not really how you return something from main,
Yeah, okay.
you know?
You don't return anything from main generally, do you?
Well,
Because that's,
so, okay, alright. The way main is thought of in Java is a bit different from other programming languages. Again, pulling reference to C. In C, main has a return type of integer.
Okay.
In C, that integer which is returned is the status code, return status code for the program to the operating
what
system.
this is, execute.
Exit code 0 is the default behavior if you reach the end of main without having called exit.
Okay.
So, you actually also have, grab yours for a moment. I believe it's either exits or system.exit. Yeah. System.exit, and then you provide,
The code.
yeah, your status code. That,
That is normal finishing with no errors.
correct. That's normal exit. Negative normally indicates
Is there a status code for every different exception there's overflow, like -5 is overflow exception or whatever?
no, so those. So your return codes from the program are not exactly the same thing as like errors. It indicated that this program, something unexpected happened, or something bad happened. But the program itself is free to define these things however it wishes. It's conventional that 0 means nothing went wrong, because operating systems look for non-zero exit codes to indicate a problem with the program that they don't know what the problem was. Okay? So generally, if this program were to return a non-zero exit code, whoever was using the program would see, oh, this thing returned in -32. What's a -32 error?
And then put that functionality in the program.
Well, like -32 would be documented somewhere in your program's documentation what that error is, right? And you would look up the documentation for this program that was written to see what the error was, how it might be fixed. In the olden days, these exit codes were like printed out in big binders, and you would have to manually flip through, find your exit code, read whatever full description you had, and that was how you did programming.
Put out a new punch card.
Exactly. So that's the difference. So system.exit is a bit different from returning from main, because it has the ability to return the status code, whereas returning from main is assumed to always be correct. So return from main always sends status code 0.
Okay.
Main is automatically returned from when you reach the end without getting a return. So yeah, that's how that works. It's not really that important unless you're like,
Because it doesn't automatically switch to the
Yeah.
console.
uh,
Okay, thank you.
no trouble. Theoretically, but I've never managed it. I think you can do it at different windows, but in the same window, I'm not sure. I've never tried it. The interface seems to suggest that you could.
Because in the like they don't have something like the first person kind of projects and I'm trying to open the system. I tried to like open this one and it removed the whole
Yeah, I think IntelliJ prefers one project at a time per window, but you can have multiple instances. For now, just put everything in. Yeah, it's where you're creating a scanner. In theory, you could create a scanner object as a class variable rather than local domain, but we haven't really gotten the object now yet, so our time will come. Such a stupid room to navigate.
So I have it replaces for only in the old versions. Trying to figure out how I would do that for capital. Do it, you would just take the words, put it in,
find a word that I didn't see any method to change
but
the
then it
word.
wouldn't give you back the right words and operators.
You have to not use the replacement. You have to do the replacement yourself.
Locate it, find it, no shortcuts, eh?
Well,
Can
it's
you
just
do
like,
the replace method?
it's practice. You shouldn't take the shortcuts while you do practice. I'm gonna give you guys a couple more minutes and then I'll go through the solution on the board, okay?
Looking for,
Just set a variable with more and
so that doesn't work.
Like, how do I make it so that if I use a uppercase case, it's still going to read without printing out all the lowercase?
You have to not use the replace method.
And I go by character.
Well, you don't have to necessarily go by characters.
If I use equals on.
Wait, let's see if I can take it.
So you can't do it.
I mean, no, not if you want to replace every
For
instance,
lower and check it for upper.
right? Even replace, I believe, will only replace it once.
Yeah, the replace all is where
Well, how do you put voice in that sentence?
Yes. In fact, regex is so far beyond where we are right now that it's often a good indication that people are cheating.
I learned it, I forgot it, we learned it, we forgot it.
Yeah, I'm a bit lost about right now.
I pull up like websites and they try to slow. It's like, I can do things. That's not
Yeah.
So,
That's not what that function does actually. Go back to your code. Equals ignore case tests the whole string. Yeah, you're trying to test to see if it's contained. That is the correct method. Okay, folks, you want to see a solution? Let's do this. Woo! All right. I'm just gonna throw this out. So, first thing we have to set up is a scanner because we are taking user input. Scanner input is equal to new scanner system dot in. There we go. Good. Step number 2. Prompt for and receive user input. S out. Make a statement, but be nice. String response is equal to input dot next line. We successfully acquire user input and store it to the response variable. Next, we need to know whether or not the word hate occurs. What method are we using? A lot of people used replace, but replace doesn't quite do it for us.
Dot equal ignore case.
Well, see, dot equals ignore case tests the entire string. So if somebody just entered the word hate, it would work. But if they entered hate in the context of a sentence, equals ignore case will not. Does that make sense? So, yes.
Index of?
Index of. So let's just store it to a variable. Int index is equal to response dot index of hate. At the moment, I'm just going for the lowercase version. We can, worry about case sensitivity once we've got the basic solution down. So, index of returns the index of the start of that string if it is found in the string you're searching. If it fails to find it, it returns -1. So if the word hate is not included, what is our output?
-1.
No, our output from the whole algorithm.
It's not included, then it's just whatever they typed in.
No change. Yes, whatever they typed in, no change, exactly. So, if index is less than 0, you can also do equals -1. Well, actually, I want to invert that. If index is greater than or equal to 0, we do something. Afterwards, we just print the response. Your sanitized input is response. In here, we want to do something. Now, you could use replace. but I'm going to do it the hard way, you know. So the question is, how do we replace, okay, so there are a couple approaches you can take. The replace method could be applied at this level, since we know that the word hate exists, right? And then we will have to repeat this procedure for every occurrence of hate. But I'm going to do it a slightly harder way. So we have the index of the h. We wish to replace that h. We want to modify the string, right? So one way that you can do this, and this is kind of a Python way of thinking about it, but like this is how it works in Python. But if you have like A, B, 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 A, right? If you want to replace the B's with C's or something, right? You can take the front, take the back, and insert the new material. Right? So this is a string slicing operation. You guys have done string slicing?
Mm-hmm.
Good. So response dot substring. Substring is your string slicing operation. It can be called with two different numbers of arguments. If you call it with one argument, it starts at whatever index you give and goes to the end. If you provide two, you are specifying the beginning and the end. Make sense?
Yeah.
So, oh shoot, I'm out of time. Okay, I'm going to do it quickly. Nobody wants to get in. Okay. So substring from 0 to the index which was found. Add, love, add, response dot substring from index plus 4 to the end. Plus 4? Yeah, I think so. We then assign that back to response. There we go. Let's just run this to make sure that this level works, and then we can quickly add a loop, make a statement. I hate Python. I love hate Python. Right? Now, we repeat this procedure until we get -1 as our index. So we modify it slightly. While index is greater than 0, we then research at the bottom of the loop. I hate Python. I love Python. I do not hate PHP as much as I should, perhaps. I do not love PHP as much as I should, perhaps. Does this make sense? Good? Yes? Wonderful? Copy and paste the code into the announcements feed because I don't have time to do anything else, because class is just about dismissed. Announcements! Announcement! Code! Publish! Boom! There we go. All right. Thank you very much for your time and attention today, folks. We will resume on whatever day it is that we resume. I think it's
Friday.
Friday? Yeah, okay, Friday. Have fun, work on assignment 1, don't go crazy. If you're finding assignment 1 to be a bit much, re-examine the requirements and see if you're adding extra stuff you don't need to do. Okay?
They had switch